All right, everyone, let's get started. I want you to just for a second picture the night sky. For most of human history, it was a place of myth and wonder, right? But today, it's becoming something totally different. We're talking $1 trillion marketplace, and yeah, even a potential battlefield. This is the new space race, and that's exactly what we're diving into today. And we're going to tackle this as part of our AMC curriculum, looking at the theme of knowledge, creation, and innovation, and really asking ourselves, what are the promises and what are the challenges of this new frontier? So check out this quote. The moon appears less as a neutral celestial body and more as a potential arena for great power competition. Wow, that really hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? I mean, think about that. The moon, something we've looked up at forever, is no longer just this beautiful neutral thing. It's being framed as strategic territory, like a piece of real estate in some giant cosmic game of chess. This is where that old sense of wonder clashes head-on with the new reality of fierce competition. And that leads us right to our main question for today, our problematic. Is space really a new Eldorado? You know, this mythical land of infinite promise and riches? Or is it just a giant mirror, reflecting all of our biggest challenges right back at us? Are we just, launching our earthbound problems like competition, conflict, and greed straight into orbit? It's this tension, this pull between the promise and the challenge, that's at the very heart of what we're studying in this part of the course. Okay, so here's our game plan. First up, the race for dominion. Then we'll look at why it's a contested frontier. After that, we'll explore a totally different idea, an alternative vision. Then we'll get practical and look at analyzing the future for your exams. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with our choice of future. Sound good? Let's jump in. All right, first stop, the race for dominion. This is all about that Eldorado vision. We're talking about space as a massive economic gold rush, a place where fortunes are waiting to be made, and of course, where global power can be secured. And just how big is this gold rush? Get a load of this number, $1.8 trillion. That's the projected value of the space economy by 2035. I mean, to put that into perspective, that's bigger than the entire economy of a country like Australia. So this isn't some far-off sci-fi dream. This is serious business, and it totally explains why there's such an insane rush to grab a piece of the action. So what's fueling this boom? It's something we call the new space economy. And look, this is a huge shift. The first space race, back in the day, that was basically a two-horse race, the USA versus the USSR. But today, the field is absolutely crowded with private companies. You've all heard of SpaceX, Blue Origin, right? They're all jumping in, fighting for a slice of that $1 trillion pie. It's a whole new ballgame. And this graph here really shows you the engine driving all that growth. We're looking at a projected 9% growth every single year. That's almost double the global GDP growth rate. It's massive. And what's really driving it? Well, it's not so much about moon bases, not yet anyway. It's about the services you and I use every single day. Things like satellite internet, data services, even stuff like cellular backhaul, which is just a fancy way of saying using satellites to connect our phone towers. Basically, space is becoming the invisible backbone of our entire digital world. So with all this economic and tech competition, you start to see a kind of hierarchy forming, what people call the space club. And just like any exclusive club, getting in is a huge symbol of your nation's power and prestige. You've got your traditional members like the US and Russia, but now you have these rising powers like China and India demanding a seat at the table. And then there are emerging players like South Korea trying to get in too. This makes the competition to not just join but to lead this club incredibly intense. Okay, so we've established there's this enormous economic prize out there. And whenever there's that much money and power up for grabs, something else always follows, the risk of conflict. And that brings us to the darker side of this Eldorado vision. We're now entering a contested frontier, looking at the militarization of space and the very real dangers of turning the final frontier into a potential battlefield. Now listen up, because for your analysis, for the back, this is absolutely crucial. You have to know the difference between these two terms, militarization and weaponization. They are not the same thing. Militarization, that's already happening. It's been happening for decades. Every major military relies on satellites for GPS, for communications, for spying. That's all passive military use. But weaponization, that's the next terrifying step. That's about putting actual weapons in orbit, things designed to hunt and kill other satellites. And that is the red line that everyone is terrified of crossing. And you know what? That red line seems to be getting closer and closer. Just look at this timeline. It's pretty alarming. These aren't accidents or malfunctions. These are deliberate tests of anti-satellite weapons, or ASATs. Each one is a major power flexing its military muscles. But here's the crazy part. Every time they do this, they create this massive cloud of space junk. Thousands of tiny metal bullets zipping around the planet at insane speeds, threatening every satellite up there, including their own. It is literally like poisoning the well that we all have to drink from. It's incredibly reckless. So how have countries responded to these growing threats? Well, the response has been pretty formal and institutional. The creation of the U.S. Space Force back in 2019 was a huge moment. It was a clear signal to the world that, for the United States at least, space is no longer just a support area for forces on the ground. No, it's now considered an operational warfighting domain, on the same level as land, sea, and air. But wait, how do countries even justify developing these kinds of weapons? Well, this quote from India's Prime Minister Modi is really interesting. He says India has no intention of entering into an arms race and frames their new capability as a deterrent, a tool for self-defense. Now that language, the word deterrent, is so important because it gets us right into this classic problem in international relations called the security dilemma. Okay, what we've seen so far is a pretty grim picture of competition and risk. But is that the only way forward? That brings us to a major turning point in our thinking today. Let's explore a completely different idea, an alternative vision, one that's not based on domination and control, but on cooperation and the well-being of the entire planet. And just to see how different this is, listen to this quote from the preamble to the Earth Charter. "We must join together to bring forth a sustainable global society." I mean, talk about a complete 180. This perspective asks us to just stop thinking about national rivalries for a minute and start thinking about our shared home, planet Earth. Instead of a competitive space club, it's proposing a cooperative team human. The core idea here is that the challenges we face, both here on Earth and out there in space, are just way too big for any single country to handle on its own. And this kind of thinking leads to this really interesting concept, an ecological civilization. What does that even mean? Well, the central idea is a fundamental shift in our values. Instead of measuring success by how much our economy grows or how much power we have, we'd measure success by the health of the entire system. It's about emphasizing cooperation, what scientists call symbiosis, and the long-term well-being of the planet itself. You can see how this is a direct attack on that Eldorado model, right? This viewpoint says that our obsession with GDP, gross domestic product, with constant economic growth at any cost, is actually the root of the problem. That's what encourages the overconsumption and the inequality that could easily turn space into just another trashed, exploited resource. So this vision argues for a completely different scorecard for humanity, one that actually measures our genuine progress and well-being, not just how much stuff we're making. Okay, so we've laid out these two huge competing visions for the future of space. Now let's make this super practical. For your exams for the BAC, it's not enough to just know these ideas. You have to be able to analyze them to build an argument. So in this next part, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to practice building a killer argument using the method you need to master. So remember, a really strong analytical paragraph always has 3 simple steps: idea, example, explanation. Let's practice with that Modi quote again. First, you state your main idea clearly. Something like, India's asset test shows how tricky the line is between defense and aggression in space. Simple. Next, you back it up with a specific example, in this case, the quote itself. But then, and this is the most important part, comes the explanation. This is where you analyze why it matters. You unpack the meaning. You show the tension, the dilemma. That's what shows the examiner you're not just repeating facts, you're actually thinking critically. And to make those arguments sound really sharp and sophisticated, you need the right tools. And in this case, that means the right vocabulary. So here are some of the key terms we've touched on. Words like geopolitical and deterrence. They clearly fit into that competitive Eldorado vision. And words like sustainability and common heritage, they belong to the cooperative, planetary well-being side. Learning to use these terms accurately is seriously going to level up your analysis. All right, let's wrap this up. For our final section, we're going to bring these two completely opposite visions head-to-head and try to finally answer that guiding question we started with. So, this table really lays out the fundamental choice in front of us. It's a tale of two futures, isn't it? On one side, you have the Eldorado vision. It's all about competition, growth, national power. Space is a frontier to be conquered and controlled. But on the other side, you have the planetary well-being vision. And here, the focus is totally different. Cooperation, sustainability, ethics. Space isn't something to conquer. It's part of a connected system that we need to take care of. So let's go all the way back to our guiding question. Is space an Eldorado, a land of promise, or is it just a mirror reflecting our biggest challenges? Well, after everything we've looked at, it seems the answer is it's both. Or rather, it's a mirror that reflects the choices we are making right now. The real final frontier, it turns out, isn't about rocket science or engineering. It's an ethical test for all of us. As humanity finally starts to step out into the cosmos, the real question isn't where we're going, but who are we going to be when we get there? What kind of civilization will we choose to bring with us?